Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So I'd like to introduce Bob Whitson. He actually founded Sierra Logic in 2001, and 5 years later, he sold it for $180 million. He's actually been still quite active in the local startup community. He's on the board. He's an advisor for several startups, and he's the current CEO of iSnap. And what I'd like to do is everyone give Bob a round of applause.
Wow, I appreciate that.
All right, so usually when I do this, I kind of want to get the audience to sort of get to know you.
Okay.
And my first question is typically, where are you from, and like, what did your parents do?
I grew up in Wisconsin, and my dad was in sales and marketing. And it's really an interesting question because I'm actually, as I get older, I don't know if as you guys get older, you'll be more like your parents all the time. And so I wouldn't be where I am today without my father, in terms of just wheeling and dealing, all the time and just being creative. So that's where I'm from. But I'm from Wisconsin. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin, so I'm a Badger fan. I'm a cheesehead, right? And right now,
I'm imagining you with big cheese on your head.
Yeah, no, I have an inflatable cheese head.
Okay.
So anyway, but that's that. So.
And so, what was your first job?
My very first job. Was I was hired right out of school to be a training manager for a computer-aided design company in Boston, and it was very low pay, but the fact is it got me going. And it was basically a computer-aided design company that designed printed circuit boards.
Okay.
And so I've always, in my entire career, I've been in the engineering realm, even though my degree is more in the microbiology area. So
it's microbiology.
yeah, I'm a microbiology person.
So did you go from that job to HP, or was it?
No, it's really interesting is the startup that I went to, it was actually a pretty young startup. They had licensed the technology from a company called Raycal out of England. I worked with them. I helped open up the West Coast office. That's how I got to the Bay Area. And then I went to a startup with very little experience. And it was just an opportunity for me to learn a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I went to the startup. And all of a sudden I had 2 kids, and the startup was running out of money, so I went and I joined HP. So anyway, it's sort of kind of did things backwards, right?
So you went from a startup. So yeah, you on your LinkedIn, you're actually at HP for 17 years.
That's a long time, right?
And so what was like your first thing at HP, and what was your last thing at HP?
So my very first job at HP was in the field office in Santa Clara, right in the Bay Area, right in the heart of the Bay Area. And since I had computer-aided design experience, I was what we call a systems engineer. I was a technical salesperson who supported the salespeople and helped them sell.
That was actually what I did. My last job, I was an SE.
Yeah, I was an SE, and so it was a great job, an absolutely great job, where the salespeople would they'd go in and they'd bring me in, and the people would ask me questions about, well, what size monitor? Well, you really need a bigger monitor, so I would actually upsell them technically, and the salespeople loved me for that, right? But it was really practical. Right. But anyway, that's and one thing about HP, and this is a message I like to send to everybody, is I did a startup before, but I really didn't have much training. But when you go through HP, we had sales training classes, we had delivering quality training classes. We were trained inside and out all the time. Once I left the sales office, we moved up to Roseville, and I went into marketing, and I worked for a division called Roseville Networks Division, and it's still around. And then I just sort of grew up in terms of that position, moved into another position in chips for a group called STD, and we basically, that's how I got started with Sierra Logic.
Okay.
From that.
So your last job, were you still marketing in your last job?
No, I was actually a business. I was a business development person. Then I went to join Agilent, and I became a worldwide marketing manager.
And Agilent was I think that's an offshoot of HP.
It was. Yeah. That was right when HP and Agilent split, and so I went to the Agilent side because the components moved to Agilent.
So it seems like when I was looking at your profile, I was like, wow, you've been here for I guess with that it's 18 years. Was that if you include Agilent? So what was the how did you decide to start Sierra Logic? What was it when you do the leap?
So so we first of all I was the worldwide marketing manager for a division called Storage Networking Division. So the technology we sold was storage networking, right? Interconnect that helped storage networking, and we were growing like a weed. We were hiring, we were growing. The components group was on the track of becoming $1 billion group, and then the bubble burst, and all the people that we had just hired, we were going to have to lay off. And so myself and 3 of our co-founders kind of looked around at each other and said, do we really want to go through that brain dead exercise? And we thought to ourselves, this is a great time to go do a startup, because the bubble had burst. We had an idea. We already had all the customers that we knew what to build next. Agilent couldn't afford to fund it. And so we did a startup, and we did it. So I mean, sometimes when there's a bubble bursting, it opens up opportunities for you.
So Agilent basically killed off that division?
No, it didn't kill off that division, but it wasn't investing in any more R&D, right? So it just sort of hunkered down and cut down costs, right? So there was no new projects. That was just selling what they had today.
Interesting.
And so we had a new product idea, and some of our customers had shared it with us, and we took that idea and we started Serologic with it.
So at this point, what is Serologic? Let's a little bit.
So Serologic was a storage semiconductor company, and I was the marketing person who had all the relationships with our customers, and then we had the R&D team that had executed selling our HP technology to these customers, and so they trusted us, and so we just took that.
Did you hire the people that got laid off essentially?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. People wanted to join us before we could afford to have them join us, just because who we were and the knowledge we had with our customer base. But the scary part is we all left right during the bubbles, and then we had great traction with VCs, venture capitalists. We were out raising money, and then 9/11 happened, and it dried up fast. It was so sometimes you take risks. And you quit your job and you invest. We all put money into the company and you invest in it, and all of a sudden, holy smokes, we're not going to get funded. What are we going to do? So sometimes it gets kind of scary. But lo and behold, we got funded. 9/11, we were one of the first companies funded post 9/11. And instead of raising $20 million pre 9/11, we raised $5 million post 9/11. So the economy changed, and so that was the beginning of it for us. It was a Christmas present for us. So raising $5 million post 9/11 was quite a feat, and we were really lucky that we had great investors for the first round.
So at this time, did you have a product, or you just had the team ready to?
No, so for the first round, for everybody to know this, for the A round, right when you're first going out, what they really do is they invest in the team. And then they want to make sure that, and for us being in Sacramento, they wanted to make sure there were enough engineers that we could actually scale. So we actually had people who we had already earmarked to hire, but they had to show up so the VCs could actually see that they were going to join the company.
Okay.
So I mean, being in Sacramento opened up some challenges for us because they just didn't trust the Sacramento engineering market for us. But luckily, we had enough talent where everybody just.
So how many people did you have in that initial, like your first core?
Oh, there were 4 of us.
4 of us?
Yeah, there were 4 people, 4 co-founders. It was myself. I was the CEO. We had a marketing person. We had a CTO who was the architect, and we had an engineering person. So all 4 of us went out and raised money.
Right.
And so that's what we mean about, for the first round, it's all about the team that you form if you're going to go during the venture capital. So but you don't necessarily have to go with venture capitalists. There's different ways now that you can go and fund, right? The rules have changed. Right now, venture capitalists aren't necessarily risk takers. They really will invest. They have to write, the people who survive now need to write big checks, and they'll only write it for a few companies. It's a tough place to raise money right now.
So, after you got your investment, how long did it take you to develop your first product?
It took us a while. And first of all, it takes like $5 million just to build a chip. So it took us a while. So what we did first is our very first product was a discrete implementation of what our chip did. And we sold that, and we ran the same firmware on what we call a board level solution. And we sold that to a couple of our bigger customers, so we generated revenue off of that. You always have to be creative with generating revenue. And then then the chip got done, it came up, and then we just switched it out, cut down the cost of the board humongously.
You go offshore and built the chip?
Yeah, no, we were fabless, so we used LSI, who was a fabless semiconductor company, to do that for us. So anyway, there's probably not very many chip heads here, But it just, that's how it works. We, you know, we use somebody else's design centers and
Okay.
everything else. So.
So what? And so it was like how many? What's the time frame here that you first got your product up?
So we probably shipped our first product in probably year 2.5, and that was the discrete implementation.
Okay.
Probably took us 3 years to get our chip out. And by that time, we had enough customer traction where we raised a Series B to help us fund that second for the chip development.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a much easier job. Once you had the traction with your customers, you've proven that, you know, it's about proving the technology risk, reducing the technology risk, the market risk, you know, and having customer validation. Those 3 things will help you raise money very quickly. And so when they saw what we were doing and the traction we had, Series B was much easier than it was for Series A.
How much did you raise in your Series B?
$12 million.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, so we raised 5 the first time, 12 the second round, and then for the C round, we didn't even have to go out and raise money. The investor said, hey, we'll just give you C round, and they set it up. We're getting close to being acquired, so they just sort of set up in tranches, so we wouldn't get too diluted. So they were really flexible with us.
Okay.
So anyway, it's kind of complicated in terms of managing dilution,
Right.
but having enough money in the bank, because when you sell to big customers, they want to know how much money you have in the bank.
And one of the things that I, looking at is like, wow, in 5 years you went from 0 to being acquired.
Yep.
For, 180 million, which is what I saw online.
Yep.
So like, how was the acquisition process?
Well, I wasn't sleeping much. So the acquisition process, first of all, Emulix approached us and lowballed us first, and we declined. And we weren't profitable at the time. And then we broke even, and we hired an investment banker, it was time to be acquired. And then Emulix came back with that order. I mean, it was a negotiation between the investment banker, and we got up to that point, to 180.
Did you have any other suitors, or?
No, we didn't at the time. You always want to have multiple suitors. Right. I set up relationships with other potential suitors, but Emulix blinked first. They wanted to expand their business. So as startup people, you always want to figure out who your potential suitors are and how you fit into their strategic plan. Mm-hmm. And that way you can sort of grease the skids and set up those relationships before you get to that point. It's all about relationships up front.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, just coffee, updates, what have you.
All right. So, yeah, it looks like, you had the acquisition, and it sounds like they must have, you stayed on for a few years.
Yep.
And then...
So right when we were acquired, we were on a $70 million growth rate. So that kind of shows you from, where we were at. So you could see exactly where, we were in production. We could just see where the orders were coming from. 5 years, we thought it was going to take 3 years, but it took a lot longer than we wanted to get to that point. But we'd hit break even. We had about 70 people, so it was a pretty big team. And when we were acquired, first of all, let me tell you, there's ups and downs, right? All of a sudden, one of our biggest customers would cancel their order, and then of course the financial analysts on the other side would freak out and raise it up to the CEO, and then all of a sudden the order would come back in. There's lots of ups and downs during the M&A process. They're always looking for examples why not to finish the acquisition during due diligence. Right. So it's always a tightrope in terms of making sure that acquisition gets done.
Right.
So yeah, it was difficult to get acquired, but it's even more difficult making sure that the transition of your entire team gets integrated into the new company. And so that's why I stayed around, was to make sure that transition was happening.
So how was the culture change going from Sierra Logic to Emulix? We are being recorded.
Oh, okay. No problem. One was Sierra Logic was private, right? So my responsibility was to the board of directors, who were mostly venture capitalists, and we had a couple independent board members. Emulix was a public company, and so our life changed completely. I managed a $150 million to $200 million business. They gave us 3 more divisions underneath us, and so I was managing that group. And then when you are acquired by a public company, you then get scrutinized by all the financial analysts. You have to practice. You have to know what to say and what not to say because it would affect the stock price. And so what I've learned is I don't want to be part of a public company again. It's too much effort focusing on the wrong things in terms of getting quality products out. You're more focusing on audits, and then you have auditors who are auditing the auditors just to make sure that you're compliant. So that was the biggest change culturally. They actually had no values at Emulex. And whereas we were coming from HP, we were very value oriented. So I smiled when you were talking about your core values, and it's something that's really important when you set up a company, sort of setting up that value system. And you have to, when you look at growing your team, do they fit into the value system or not? You need to have that comparison stuff. Emulex did not have a value system. And so the CEO asked me to drive a value system inside of the corporation. And let me tell you, it's a lot harder to develop or try to push a value system into an existing culture than it is right from the get-go. So that was probably the biggest problem, a challenge we had was the lack of values. And it was awful. I mean, it was backstabbing, people fighting for dollars. It was down and dirty. It was sort of like trench warfare in the public company.
So at what point did you say this is enough and I want to buy my island or do something else?
Well, let me be clear. Our investors had hit home runs with us, but we did not. None of us,
You don't have your own island yet.
No, we don't have our own island. But I think I lasted 3 years, 4 years, and I learned a lot in terms of being able to manage a a geographically dispersed team and managing a big business, and also understanding the realities of a public company. But I just got tired, and I saw the transition was done. I felt it was time to retire, so I retired.
All right. Well, I'm kind of glad you're still sort of part of our ecosystem. And I guess your next year you became the CEO of iSnap. So what attracted you to iSnap?
Well, there was an intermediate stuff that it's not necessarily on my LinkedIn account.
Oh, okay.
And I was actually an investor in this company called Whitson, which is Brian Watwood. He's actually spoken here before.
Right.
And Brian is a quadriplegic, and he invented this lever drive wheelchair system. And so I was an angel investor in that, and then I became a CEO, and I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do in terms of that. So I actually sold Widget to another company, and then after that, by the way, right at the end,
was it a bit successful? I mean, I remember they were honored as honored like the person of the year. The
Innovator of the Year.
Innovator of the Year
from the UC
from
Davis.
SARTA.
Yeah, from SARTA. He did. The company has never reached its full potential, and part of it is the fact that many of the people who required these accessories had to go through insurance. And as you know, working through insurance, it's non-deterministic, so cash flow was always a challenge. So that was one of the challenges with Widget. But it's still a cool product. And when we sold the company, we made sure that there was a good support mechanism for all of our customers, as well as taking care of a couple of other things as well. So once I sold Widget, right at the end, we sold more systems using social media that we had sold before. And so it was based off that interest of social media, which is not natural for somebody in my demographic. I just felt it was important to go pick up more tools in social media, and that's how I got invited to join iSnap from the investors. So that's how I got involved. And for me, I kind of view you want to pick up as many tools along the way to help continually learn. And for me, I thought social media was going to be an important part, moving forward to help me stay relevant. And so it's all about staying relevant. So that's how I got involved with iSnap.
So why don't you tell us about what iSnap is?
So iSnap is a lean and mean startup company. It is a digital. At a high level, it's a digital marketing solution in a box. And we use photo sharing as a way for our clients to brand every picture that's posted. And everybody, 98% of the people in social media share photos. And so what we do is we place our photo stations, which is a kiosk with a camera and a screen, which is just a platform. And people will walk up. people get attracted to it, and they'll post a picture that's branded with our client's brand all the way around it. But what's more important is the cloud services and the software behind it, where we collect all the contact information. Our clients can have access to all the contact information, can see the real-time posts, get their email addresses. By the way, people posting give permission to do this. There's an opt-in capability, and so it's really a marketing tool in a can. Our customers go from if you go to iSnap.com, we average about 10 picture every 10 seconds around the world.
Oh.
So we have probably close to 4 million pictures in our database right now. Our customers go from a little bar, a hot busy bar in Toronto, to Norwegian Cruise Lines and Celebrity Cruise Lines. So huge enterprises as well, right? So our software, we have capabilities of managing through one pane of glass, one system managing an entire network of our systems. Everything is networked, and everything goes through our cloud, right? So it's all about cloud services. Our cloud services are expensive. We chew up a lot of space.
So are you selling these devices to? Are you renting them, or you just give? What's your?
So we have we sell, but we actually we sell to a lot of event people who will go ahead and rent the systems out for events, and so that we have a network of partners, rental partners that will go out and do that and do weekends. Our job is to sell our systems and to support our systems and augment them.
Okay.
Right? So if you're really interested in seeing it, just go to iSnap.com and you'll see our photo feed. Our business one is business.isnap.com. There's links between both. We have two websites, but you can see all the pictures that are being taken, and you can see all the branding that goes around every single picture.
Well, next time I was hoping you could bring one today.
Yeah, I was, but I actually had a board meeting today,
Okay.
so I was sort of around, right? I saw that.
Well, next time, anytime you have it, you're welcome. You can bring one of your iSnap devices, and we'll start.
So where we're headed, just to let you know where we're headed, and it's always important to have a roadmap of where you're headed, right? One of our barriers of entry is our cost of our kiosk. So we're really moving, and this is for you, is we would really like to have tablets, either on a pedestal or a handheld, be able to take pictures, branded pictures. You could have a brand ambassador going in. For instance, if you're Absolute Vodka and you're having a great big campaign, you could go to a big trade show and take people's pictures and then hand them to it, and they could actually sign directly into Facebook or Twitter or email. And so what we're all about is what we call monthly recurring revenue or subscriptions, selling subscriptions. So we feel it's an elastic market. The more units we can get out there, the more subscriptions we'll be able to generate. So it's not about platform. It's not about selling the kiosks. It's about the subscriptions that are behind it, and the value, the marketing value that you're delivering to our customers.
Okay. Have you looked at like Vigo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's lots of demand. We get lots of ideas. Probably the next thing I will be looking at. In fact, we're looking at a very large deal. Right? We used to sell onesies, twosies. Now we're selling 10s and 20s. But we're looking at a large deal where they need to have video, right? It's a short time video, and that changes our entire database. It's a big change for us, but that's where everything is going.
So question then, because we're in the same sort of space with social media, have you had the feds approach you yet?
Well, we have the U.S. Navy as
But I mean, after to have access.
no, we have not. Not that we know of.
What are your terms? Do you have like?
So our
User
clients own the IP,
Okay.
and it goes to their cloud services, and then we have non-exclusive rights to it because it's going across the cloud. So that's how the data flows back.
But you own the data, or the client owns the data.
The client owns the data, but we
So
have
the feds can't
non-exclusive rights
access the
because
data
all
through
that data is in our cloud, and they get access to it through their dashboards.
Okay.
Okay. So everything is encrypted.
You haven't had any users ask you about your T's and C's?
Part of our T's and C's are part of our contract, our
Okay.
purchase agreement. We have T's and C's in part of our.
I mean, end users, the actual people using the photo. So you've had nobody come after you about who has access to this?
Yes, but there are certain brands that are very concerned about who has access to it and who doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very concerned.
By
Yeah,
using
absolutely.
it
It's all about who owns the IP and what are they going to do with it. And some people just don't trust us. The fact is they're afraid that we're going to market to their customer base and we don't.
What are you doing about the trust factor?
Well, as I told you up front, when you're posting a picture, there's an opt-in.
Okay.
right? So it's opt-in. And by the way, you're whitelisted right into Facebook. You don't even know what your Facebook, we're networked, so when you post a picture, you're logging right into your Facebook account directly and right into your Twitter account or your email, right? So we don't keep, we don't know any of those passwords. It's just passed through completely.
Okay.
We're a trusted source for Facebook
Okay.
and Twitter. Good, great question. Those are heavy-duty IP questions, so great. Any other questions?
Oh, we actually have a Q&A after this, so,
Okay, sorry about that.
so you kind of jumped the gun.
Oh, sorry about
That's
that.
okay. No, actually at this point, where do you see, on iSnap, where do you see it going?
Yeah, the fact is there's a lot of copycats out there. And we were just awarded a very broad patent where we basically own a presence-based photo system with credentials going out to the social media, cloud-based, and all the analytics behind it. And so it's a big deal for us, right? But the fact is we're a relatively small company, and we have a lot of people who are infringing on our patents, but we don't have the financial wherewithal to go after those people and generate royalty payments or whatever else. So that's something that we talked about in our board meeting today. So what we're doing is we're actually taking this information. Many of our clients will have email, they'll have their email list and they'll go right to MailChimp or something else. But what we're doing is we're adding some data sciences. So not only, if somebody posts on Facebook, we get their birthdays. If the birthdays are in their Facebook profiles, we'll get their birthdays and we'll show demographics. But we've also added image analysis where we can augment and it's not facial recognition, it's image analysis where we can actually take a picture of you and see how happy you are, what your age is within a quarter of a year, what race you are, and so all of a sudden it allows our clients to be able to target,
Is this your
segment
technology, or are you using a third
no,
party?
the third party for image analysis, but it's all about the data sciences. We do A/B testing. We can do text analysis in terms of the comments people do on their posts, and take all this information so you can have a very small targeted group, and then you can do Facebook ads, and we actually supply this. We do this today, Google ads or whatever else, and it changes our whole subscription model by doing it that way.
Does
So that's the
Google pay you?
transition we're going through. Go ahead.
Google
Oh, I'm
pay
sorry.
you? Google or Facebook pay you for that?
They will be paying Facebook or Google for that. We may have the ability for our smaller customers to have a cap, and we'll just charge. We'll pay for that for a certain number of ads. But the key is how do you target the right demographic? For instance, ages 25 to 28, blonde hair, whatever else that demographic is. People who know that's who are buying most of their products, and they can go and target that and market directly to them. Email drip campaigns, hey, we want you back, right? And so we have the ability to track them. For every time they go on to a website, they'll be able to see ads placed on that. For instance, for every place they go, you'll see little ads. For instance, free popcorn. Hey, you come to the next IMAX movie, you'll get a free popcorn. And so every time they go, they'll see this little ad. So the idea is to get the customers back into our client's facility. So it's called retargeting, and it's sort of a new area. So some people, I get frustrated when I get my Amazon, I get inappropriate ads from my Amazon, but these are all things that are people who've been to a facility, they've opted in for it, and they're getting appropriate ads, and that's not so bad. So that's where we're headed.
So you said something interesting, and I was like, so you've got these patents, and I always tell people, when I deal with a client, I think they have a really good idea. I always say, you should get a patent.
Yep.
But now you're telling me it's sort of like, wow, you need to be able to defend this patent.
Absolutely.
And so, and then you hear about patent trolls, and that's all they do for a living is they sue people for infringing their patents.
Yep.
Right? So, I guess the question is like, are you going to try, with your board meeting, are you going to try to go after these people, or are you just going to that are infringing on your patents? Or?
Well, there's two ways we can either go after them with a stick and send out cease and desist letters, and all of a sudden, and then face lawsuits, which is a waste of money or the other alternative is to go to all of our infringers and say, hey, you're infringing on our property, but hey, would you consider licensing our technology? Or even our new stuff that I just described to you, and kind of use that carrot in terms of generating incremental royalties from that. So you don't necessarily, there's, it's a carrot or a stick thing, and sometimes you need to use both.
So that's your approach. You haven't done it yet.
No, we are not.
That's
We still don't have the financial wherewithal to go in and open up lawsuits, especially with our biggest competitors.
What about finding a lawyer that would take it on for a cut?
We could do that, but you still have to go through court cases. I mean, they have to get paid somehow, right? So that's a risk. Yeah. So, but no, it's expensive. So anyway, it's nice to have the patent for if we get acquired, it's going to add value to our company. It's also there's another avenue where we could find a strategic partner where we would license the technology to them and let them go after those people, and then we would basically cut up and get a cut of that royalty payment.
Okay.
Right? Basically a sugar daddy. So there's different ways
I'm
of
looking
managing
for one
your
of those.
proposal. What?
I'm looking for one of those.
Yeah, me too. Me too, right? So it's really interesting. Glad we have the patent. It's great potential. It's defensible. If anybody comes after us, we can prove to them right now in terms of that perspective. But it's hard to be offensive right now in the scale that we're at today. I would much rather spend that money on future development than spending it on lawsuits.
Okay. Well, the other thing I know that I talked to a few companies that you're an advisor to. Can you talk about some of the startups that you're an advisor to?
Sure. I'm an advisor to a company called iSnap, which is a fireproof, waterproof storage system. Remember, I'm sort of a storage person. I am an advisor for I was on the board of directors for the startup team when startup was still existing.
Yeah.
I am on the board of directors for another startup, which is actually it's a very interesting company. It's kind of on the fringe, but it's for the emerging marijuana business. And since I've been in a startup world, they decided to add me to the board, and I said sure because.
What tack on? Can you talk about what you're doing?
High level, it's for people who bake, and how do you know how strong your baking goods are, and be consistent for that.
Is that what Sheldon?
Brownies.
Well, no, it's like how strong are your brownies, right? Or how strong are your cookies, or whatever else. So it's just a very low-cost device that allows you to. It's like an A/B comparison thing. So it's not a product yet, but but it's. I just thought it was it's an emerging market.
No, I have a couple of cannabis clients, and holy cow, they have money.
No, they do, and so that's that. The other area that I think I'm trying to remember other advisory boards. V-Mobile is a company that sort of is like what you talked about, but they're really talking about in terms of hey, my air conditioner problem, a service person, how do you only have them go once rather than having to go back multiple times? So they use technology, video technology, and it's all locked into the cloud and it's all documented. So that's another startup that I've been working with. So it's just I like to kind of get exposed to different sizes, different types of businesses, just so I learn.
So what's your feeling? Your feel of the Sacramento startup community at this point?
It's growing. I had some excellent conversations today, so I'm really excited about it. I like to share it. I love I don't mind taking calls for it from whatever. It's something I enjoy in terms of doing that. I'm excited about Sacramento. The challenges that we have is raising money. It's getting better. It's getting better, but it was something that we raised all of our money out of the Bay Area when we raised the $32 million total from Serologic. But there's just not that sort of financial wherewithal within Sacramento to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Or they'll extract blood for you in terms of that. I'm sorry, I'm just a little bit. It's just challenging.
Well, no. What I've been telling the startups that I work with is, actually 60% of the VC money globally is in Silicon Valley.
Yep.
And so what I've been telling them is join. If you throw a rock, you'll hit 10 accelerators in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Join one of those accelerators. And then and there's one that I won't say because on camera. There's one that's every 8 weeks. It's like the McDonald's, and it's either 3.5% or $3,500. You pay your way to get in it. But what's more important is you actually get in, on the demo day, you get introduced to the Silicon Valley network of investors. And so there's a couple of startups that actually have done that, and they've done very well in raising funds in the Bay Area. So that's really
it's hard. It's really hard to be able to do that. I do see it's getting better. I'm currently raising money, right? And so I'm facing the reality right now, right? So it's a challenge locally.
Yeah, it is. But the good thing is we're 2 hours away, and you're in Sand Hill Road.
Yeah, and by the way, I know Sand Hill Road pretty well.
Yeah, sure you do.
But I'm hopeful. I've engaged with a couple of people locally, and so it's getting stronger all the time. And the thing that really which is the tipping point, is when there's some good exits from local investors, because that kind of feeds. When there's a good exit, it's easier for that fund to raise more money, right, for the next fund, right? So there's payoffs, and then all of a sudden, hey, these guys know what they're doing. They've made good investments, and so it kind of perpetuates it. But it takes time. We've been fighting this challenge from SARTA and all these other things for quite a while. So
I do see it changing because in Silicon Valley, it's become so expensive. And I was just talking to someone, my cousin actually spends $6,000 a month in rent, and everything's hyper salaries, hyper traffic, hyper mortgages, and to me, Sacramento is really going to be the natural outlet.
I agree. So let me tell you, I'm based out of another group, sort of like the Urban Hive, and I'm very impressed with the caliber of people that I'm exposed to. So I'm very hopeful for a lot of the people who are sitting here in terms of being able to drive their businesses forward. But just remember, it's all about teams, right? That's the one message is you've got to have a strong team. You have to trust that team to be able to do what they need to do to be successful.
Right.
So that's the one message. And if you have built a strong company, the money should come. Right? The money should come. It should become easy. And there's different ways, right? Strategic money. There's obviously the network, running, doing your little ads on the networks and that sort of stuff. But remember, every investor that you have, you're going to have to manage that investor moving forward, right? And so you just it adds to your burden when you have investors that you have to keep communicating to.
All right. So at this point, I'm going to open up to the audience for questions.
What's the good news you heard today?
What's the good news I heard today?
Yeah, you said you heard some really good news today about the startup community.
Well, I just had some excellent conversations around this room, frankly. So, and I have conversations at the other place I'm at, and so I'm just amazed at the quality.
You can say their name. It's okay. Hacker Lab.
Yeah, we're based out of Hacker Lab.
That's fine.
Yeah. And by the way, when you do startups, it's really important to be frugal, right? You just don't need to spend a lot of money on fixed expenses. It's more about putting your money into the product and into marketing and everything else.
So when people go back and forth from the Hacker, there's people here from the Hacker Lab and vice versa.
Yeah.
It's a small community.
It's a very small community.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's where we're at. Go ahead.
Which platform do you think has the most opportunity? Tablets, Apple phones, Android phones, smart TVs?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. For us, it's going to be, first of all, one of the objections we have to come through is, hey, I can take a selfie. Why do what value are you bringing to the system, right? Everybody's, hey, I take selfies. The difference is there are people who have affinity for specific brands, and they want to share the fact that they're in that brand. And so, if they're having a great time, they could go and take a picture with that brand, and they're proud to do that. They want to become a brand ambassador automatically. And so you don't get that with the selfie necessarily. You get your selfies, and by the way, with selfies, you always have to say, who's going to send it to me, and you never get all the selfies, right? Whereas the distribution is controlled by the people who are actually taking the pictures. You log in and it takes the picture. So for us, our business is, there's two ways. I see it first going to tablets, and then with fencing, I think that we could basically use cell phones, where people would be in a fence, and then the brand would be able to add a border around every one of those pictures, and then they could use their cell phones and still get that brand and still get all the analytics. So that's how I see it evolving over time.
You have a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious how the IP was handled when you transitioned from Agilent to your own company.
Um,
Ooh, that is interesting.
No, that was a very interesting question. We, first of all, they had declined to invest in the idea that we had, right? So they already declined, so it wasn't, and they just didn't expect us, all the top executives in that team, to leave. And so that was the problem. The only letter we got from Agilent was from stealing their people. And then so we had a cease and desist letter from Agilent saying, don't hire any more of our people. And I shared that with our board, and they applauded, saying, hey, you're being aggressive enough where you're getting your cease and desist letters. So anyway, that's how we handled it. It wasn't really, the IP wasn't the issue, it was more of that. When I left Emulex, I had to sign a non-compete clause for 3 years, not to poach any of the people out of the Emulex team.
That's illegal.
So and we did not have a non-compete clause against Agilent. Okay? They just didn't have their acting together. Okay? Great question, by the way.
And isn't it true, because I got the same one when I started my company.
Yep.
About stealing people.
Yep.
But in California, it's law. California is a pro-competition state. So somebody can tell you that you can't steal their people or whatever, but you can steal anything you want.
It's an at-will employment, right?
It's an at-will employment, and it favors competition.
So it's better for the employees.
I see David smiling there, so.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
With iSnap, what are some of the biggest or interesting technical challenges that you faced in building the platform?
From the user perspective, for the people who are taking photos, how do we streamline it? We have keyboards, or we have a touch screen on the screen, but logging in takes some time. And some of our, it's cumbersome. So we've got to figure out how do we get, if you log in once, and then if you use, NFC or something else so they recognize you next time so you don't have to log in again to really speed it up, that's probably that's something that we really need to improve on, is just throughputs for certain venues. We don't want lines because people will get frustrated waiting in a line. And so that's one of our biggest challenges, is how do we make it simple? And there's cool technologies. Android's always had NFC capabilities. The new iPhones do, so pretty soon NFC will be that way. One of our cruise lines people, another one of our challenges is nobody can remember their Facebook password, and especially alcohol. They just don't go. So what we're trying to do is everybody has a door, when they're on board, they have a key to their. It's basically a credit card, and it gets into their room. So if we could have a swipe where they would have, if we could figure out how to get their Facebook login and password onto that card, they just swipe it in and they'd be in like that. So those are some of the things we're doing on the front side, what we call the user side. The back end side is how do we continue to add value, marketing value, and make it easier for our clients to be able to take advantage of that marketing information. And that's what I was talking about before. Right? It's all about how do they perceive value in the subscription services they're paying for, and how do they maintain it? How do you minimize churn? All the SaaS sort of things, all the metrics that we all are focused on.
Great question over here, sir. Y'all like that question?
I'm just curious.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious regarding that past question. Is there any interest in doing like fingerprints and logging in with fingerprints?
It's the hard part is how do you log that fingerprint into a Facebook login and whatever else. But yeah, there's. Yeah, I mean,
you don't have any
work.
knowledge that Facebook might be thinking about implementing something like that, or Google.
Yeah. So it's and those are all big software changes as well, right? So for us, it's how do we validate Facebook? All these social media platforms want to make sure that it's authenticated, right? So what we would do is we would just collect the NFC or keychains and then just link it in and automatically in our own database provide that information to them. We would never know what it is.
It probably wouldn't work on cruise ships, but I was surprised. There was an app that I went to log into the other day that I had forgotten my password, but it knew my ID. It sent me a text, and with a code, and then I entered that code into the app, and it logged me in. And I thought, wow, that's pretty slick.
Yep.
I didn't have to wait for like an email to get sent with my password. So
Yeah, it is.
I like
I just updated my iPad, and so they were trying to get me a code to get back onto iCloud, and every code they sent to me didn't work. So sometimes it works and it doesn't.
Right.
But you're right, it doesn't work on cruise lines because there's no coverage.
Right.
There's no coverage
Right.
on cruise lines, right? There's no cell phone coverage.
It might
or
work at the
anything.
IMAX.
Right. Yeah, IMAX would be great. By the way, IMAX, if you want to see one of our systems, go to IMAX on K Street Mall. You'll see one of them there.
We
as well.
always take our picture when we go there.
Well, thank you. So,
Yeah?
This might be an esoteric idea, but I see iSnap in every single school where the students can create their own yearbook with iSnap right there, where you can get their picture at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, or where they're creating it themselves instead of just roving around at the games. But
yeah, that's an interesting idea. It's something along the same lines, and surprisingly, is orthodontists are some of our are getting hot. Braces on, braces off, right? So it's the same sort of thing. It's braces on, braces off, and our number one lead generator is when people see our systems. And surprisingly, I've got a big deal because the person who is driving the big deals went to their child's orthodontist office and saw it and fell in
Really?
love. Yep. So it's all about seeing the system, using the system. 40% of our leads come from people who've seen the system or used it. Okay? So it's really important. So the thing is for us to get as many systems out there as possible.
how big are your contraptions and your equipment? Is it a big box?
It's about this tall. It's probably right to this tall. When you stand up, there's a touchscreen and there's a camera up on the top, and it's all it really is. All the intelligence is in the cloud, but it's just basically a PC with a touchscreen on it and networking capabilities. So it's really a pretty simple device, right? Standard off-the-shelf components.
Yeah, we're having our holiday party next month. We should, we'll have
Take
to have
Christmas
Sure.
photos.
But again, so think about throughput, right? You'll see what our challenge is in terms of throughput. Okay. Go ahead.
How did you get involved in iSnap? Were you an investor in them? Were they looking for a CEO?
No, I was invited by the board of directors to come in, and I came in as a consultant, and I was, I wasn't being aggressive or anything else. I was just watching, and then I realized that, and then the board was getting kind of anxious, saying, "Bob, we'll just make you the CEO." And I said, "No, just wait." And so the founders came to their own conclusions, and they said, "Bob, we think you'd be a better CEO." And so that's how it happened.
And I think that's an important thing for startup founders to hear, because a lot of times they are the idea person, the
Yeah.
tech person, but that doesn't mean they're going to be a good CEO.
Or a good manager necessarily, because they're developers,
So-
right? They develop the technology behind. They're the brains behind all the technology. They're not necessarily.
Is that hard transition for the founder of iSnap?
Yeah, no, he came to his own conclusion. So on the surface, it wasn't, but I was lucky that I survived being the CEO at Serologic. I thought I was going to get removed because I was a first-time CEO. So yeah, I think it's a tough thing, but as a founder, your goal is to how do you maximize your stock, and sometimes you have to stand aside and bring in some other leaders, right, to make that happen. Yep, I was impressed that they came to their own conclusions. I'm glad they did. Go ahead.
How big was iSnap before they brought you on board as the CEO?
Well, that's really interesting. I guess my mark is really the founders were kiosk people. What they really wanted to do was push selling kiosks, and their margins were selling kiosks. What I've really done is I switched to selling subscriptions, and the platforms are just enabling those subscriptions. And so now our revenue is a lot more predictable. So it's all about what we call monthly recurring revenue. People who are renewing their subscriptions. So that's the value that I brought to it. So from a size perspective, we haven't been growing like exponentially, but we've been growing year over year.
Well, I mean, how big were they before they brought you on board? Like, what would be a good size for a startup to be before they brought it on CEO?
Yeah, I think it really has to do with how big is your team, and how do you manage that team, and how do you bring and hire the right people. And they actually had made some mistakes in terms of hiring and cost. So So it all depends upon the skill set of the team and when it happens. If there's not a clear-cut answer in terms of that. Just remember, I mean, John Scully got brought in over Steve Jobs, right? And that was a debacle in itself, right? So sometimes it doesn't work out as well as you thought it would either. Right.
Well, last question here.
How intensive is the process to set up a kiosk? Is it quick or is it heavy?
Well, it's relatively quick. The actual manual setup is easy. It's all put together. It's modular, 3 pieces. All goes together with that's the actual hardware. What we need to do is set them up on the cloud account and set up a device and set them up and define the subscription that they purchase.
Right.
So those are the things. So and we onboard them. So it probably we can do that in a half hour. You know, we can onboard them in about a half hour. It takes them probably 15 minutes to set up the system. So no more than an hour.
And it's all wireless?
It could be wireless, wired, or hotspot driven.
Because at a bar or something, you've got a place next to the jukebox, and there's probably no internet.
Yeah, internet sometimes is a challenge, right?
Yeah.
So wired is always the best. Wireless is second. And by the way, if it's shared, if it's shared bandwidth, then it'll just slow down your process in terms of getting things posted, right? Because you're fighting for bandwidth.
Right.
So it's all about, network quality is important for our system, right? Just to make that, when you post a picture and log in, it needs to be quick and not delayed.
Right. And then your subscription, is it based on photos taken in a kiosk? Or is
Yeah,
it based
no,
on
today
usage?
it's just it's licensed per. There's one subscription per kiosk. But moving forward, what we're going to do is we're going to start charging the number of connections. So when our customers continue to grow their connections, our subscription rate will go up. It'll be graduated. Right? So that it's a more scalable subscription model for us. That's one of the
That'll
big
be
investments
based
that we're moving toward.
Based on users, right?
Yeah,
Not-
based on user numbers.
Okay.
Yep.
So, final question for you.
Yep.
Who is your favorite superhero?
Who's my favorite superhero? I guess I'm sort of a Batman fan, just because he's edgy, kind of dark. I'm not as, I just sort of like, and he's challenged, right? He's got, he's a more realistic superhero than the other people are.
He has no superpowers.
So who's yours?
I was going to actually introduce you to Samurai Whitson. So,
Oh, well, thank you very much.
so we want to thank you. This is our gift thank you for speaking tonight. And it only works on Android.
Okay, well, okay. So hopefully one of these years I'll get an Android.
You can get an Android tablet real cheap, but anyway, it's fun. And the only thing is when you get killed, you actually see yourself get killed.
Oh, cool.
Right. But thank you very much.
Hey, thank you,
Thanks
you
for speaking
guys.
up.
Thanks.